keeping you up to speed on all your Colorado teams. It's time for Coffee Break.
Thursday means that here in the metro area, a cold front is upon us in a big hurry. So hope everybody's preparing for that. But if you listen closely, if you really, really strain for it, you can hear the clinking and clanking of the wheels turning over at Broncos Park, powered by Common Spirit, as the Broncos wrapped up their end-of-season press conferences yesterday, kind of putting a bow on a season that was disappointing in ways, surprising and encouraging in others. And so James Merilatt, who's sitting in with me today, I want to know what your thoughts were on the overall kind of message that we heard from Greg Penner, from George Payton, and from Sean Payton, because to my ears, the message was pretty clear, and that is two things. One, this organization feels confident that Bo Nix is their starting quarterback moving forward, and all boats are pointing in the direction of how to take that next step and move forward.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So I think the positive takeaways were nobody was willing to quite say the season was a success, right? Even though I think they were encouraged by it and it was reason for optimism, nobody seemed satisfied with just making the postseason. So that's good. I think you have to have an owner, a head coach, and a GM that are heading in the same direction. They clearly were all in this. I mean, they were even using the same buzzwords throughout the press conference. So that was
smells like Smythe.
What's that?
I said it smells like Smythe a little bit.
Exactly. They were all. I mean, the number of times we heard that their offseason was going to be measured, no matter who was up there. Clearly, they were on the same page. That's good. I think the one thing that I had as a concern, and I wrote about it today at denversports.com, is don't convince yourself that you're that close, right? Like, I think this team took a really good step. I think some of the things, and we've talked about it all season long, of, well, you were 1-8 against teams that had a winning record. You beat up on the NFC South. Like, you got to look at it a little bit realistically and know, hey, we got to move. We got to continue to improve and not just think, hey, we just re-up with the same guys. Everybody gets a little bit more experience. We're going to be even better. That can be dangerous, convincing yourself you're that close. That was my only concern, and it runs pretty deep.
Well, I think I can understand in principle your concern if that's the way that you took it. I don't know that I took it that far, because I think that there were pretty measured, not to use that buzzword again, but pretty measured, clear comments to kind of allude to the fact that while they're satisfied, they're not quite there yet. If you take a look what, Broncos owner and CEO Greg Penner said in one of his openings, he said, while we're incredibly pleased with the progress and the number of accomplishments this year, we don't at all feel like we're satisfied with where we are. And we know this offseason is going to be another critical one for us to build for the future. Greg Penner, I think, is a guy who deserves a ton of credit for jumping into this NFL ownership ring and having very little prior knowledge or background as to how it works. Certainly not on the business side as a businessman, because he's clearly very successful at that. But the NFL is kind of its own insular beast in a way. And football operations has a lot of nuance to it. And I think Greg Penner is somebody who has taken all that in stride. And I find if you were to listen to him from his very first press conferences to now, I think I certainly can sense a lot more confidence and boldness in him on how to proceed and move forward, which I think is a net positive for the Broncos. Conversely, if you look at Sean Payton, who never has, a shortage of words to say in front of a microphone, I think he echoed that as well, in the sentiment of it not being like it being a positive, that there was things to be encouraged by, but not as much. Trey, go ahead and throw Sean Payton's graphic up there on the screen. We're not looking backwards. We're looking ahead. And it starts with the division. There's a lot of confidence in this team. If we could get past that game being the Bills, the next game we had to play, we felt really good about. Now, what I'll differ between Greg Penner and Sean Payton is, I don't know if I would have said it that way if I was Sean Payton. Like, I don't know if you can get blown out by 20 plus points, and then turn and go, yeah, well, if that didn't happen, we definitely had those other guys.
Yeah.
Well, even if there's a chance that you can see why those lines would be drawn, they were a blocked, a misexecuted field goal at the end of regulation away from being 2-0 against the back-to-back Super Bowl champs. So I get it, but man, by the end of the game, it didn't quite feel that way. And frankly, I think if you get blown out by 3 scores, I don't know that you get to say that and have it hold weight.
Agreed. So they're basically saying it because they beat the JV, just, a bunch of guys that used to be selling cell phones version of the Chiefs, and they almost won. Like, come on. This is a team that's won the division 9 straight times, have been to 4 Super Bowls. They've won 3, and they've won it back-to-back. You just ended your streak of winning, not having a winning season since 2016, not being in the playoffs since 2015. Going into week 18, the Chiefs were 6 games ahead of the Broncos. 6. The Jaguars finished 6 games behind the Texans. Does anybody think the Jags are close to the Texans? No, of course not.
No.
So they
now, again, though, I will say, had that field goal gone through and they pull off the upset in Arrowhead, and then, yes, they have the JV beater, game where they beat up on the Chiefs in the last week of the season there, I think it holds a little more merit if you say it that way.
Sure.
But it didn't happen.
But it's also
it didn't happen.
It's also a team that was 15-1 and was able to rest their starters heading into that game. So it's a little disingenuous to say you're close. That to me is why I'm worried. You ain't close to the Chiefs. You're not. You know what? You weren't even the closest team in your division to the Chiefs. The Chargers were. So if Patrick Mahomes gets hurt week 1, Tom Brady style,
you're talking about a difference of 1 game. Though,
fine, but if
in
Patrick
terms of the
Mahomes
record between the Chargers,
week 1 next year, and he's out for the season, Tom Brady style, which team in the division is going to pounce on that opportunity? Well, there's 2 that appear ready to: the Broncos or the Chargers.
And I give the Broncos a fair shake of that. If you're telling me that
okay,
Tom Brady style Patrick Mahomes goes down, I think the Broncos will have a fair shake. It's especially with the notion that they all seem very clearly aligned, even if they're not ready to reveal it to us yet, about how they want to proceed in this offseason in terms of positions to focus on in free agency in the draft, wide receiver, tight end, running back, inside linebacker, maybe depth at corner and safety. Also kind of
feel like you read my column.
I may have.
That's a lot of, and you're right. So here's the positive, right? That in terms of where they're at, if you mentioned the most important positions to have for a football team, right? It's going to be quarterback, left tackle, edge rusher, cornerback. Like, those are premium positions. The Broncos had a Pro Bowler or a Pro Bowler alternate at all 4 positions. That's really good. They also had, another offensive lineman in Quinn Miners that's on there. They had a kicker. They had some pieces. You're like, all right, that's great. The glaring omission is because Marvin Mims is a special teams guy, not a single skill position guy, not a receiver, not a tight end, not a running back. They need to upgrade those 3 spots in the worst possible ways. I think Cortland Sutton would be a great number 2. I think some of these young receivers trying to develop as the, hey, he's our home run hitter, he's our slot guy, whatever. Great. They need a number 1 receiver. They don't have one. They need a tight end that's better than Adam Troutman, Lucas Kroll, or Nate Atkins. They need a running back. Look at the teams that are still in the playoffs. They have workhorse running backs. Like, the NFL world's kind of cyclical. It's going back to that. If they went out and addressed all 3 of those positions, I think we'd feel great about this offense heading into next year. If they convince themselves, hey, Devon Vele and Troy Franklin are going to have Nick Benito type steps, I think that's a gamble. So, or Audric Estime is going to have that kind of step. That's a gamble. Same with inside linebacker. You can't ignore that position forever. Riley Moss, is he the answer opposite Pat Surtain? You got to have somebody opposite that guy, because arguably the best defensive player in the league. The guy on the other side is going to get a lot of footballs coming his way. You better be pretty darn good.
It was a little bit of a up and down, season for Riley Moss. But I mean, we were singing his praises for about the first 9 weeks of the season. And then, he gets hurt and he's got to come back. And his first test after getting hurt is Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and, Joe Burrow.
And a lot of people got burned by those guys. So I like some of the, here's what I don't want to hear though. I don't want the spin stories coming out from all the guys we know, write the spin stories down at Dove Valley for that team saying, hey, it's going to be Riley Moss, Troy Franklin, Devon Vele, Audric Estime. They're all going to make the leap, and that's why this team's going to be better next year. 1 might, 2 might, but all of them aren't going to make the leap. Right. They got to determine which guys are ready to do that and which ones aren't.
I agree with you, in terms of the weight that this offseason holds. And I will say this, if I were a betting man, which I've been known to be, I think the Broncos are going to be aggressive. And I have faith in that. Based on the underlying factor, they have decisive decision makers in the positions that matter. Greg Penner is a no-nonsense guy. He's clearly adapting to the NFL circle and the NFL world and how it runs, and he needs no lessons in business. Sean Payton is a guy that when he says, I want something, it's go do it. And George Payton, who I think for several years early on in his tenure, that shine was starting to rub off a little bit with the emergence of guys like Jonathan Cooper and Nick Bonito and kind of the steps we've seen them take. Obviously, his first major draft pick being the potential defensive player of the year in Pat Surtain, and finding Riley Moss in the third round to do some things that are unexpected as a rookie. I think he's kind of coming back to that. So if you're telling me that they're all in lockstep, they have decisive decision-making at head coach, at general manager, and at the ownership level, and a united vision of building around Bo Nix, I think they'll be aggressive, and I have faith that they'll be able to we will not be harping as much on the run game next year as we will this year.
I hope so. They didn't have a single 100-yard rusher all year.
Nope.
So the closest
the leading rusher on the team had 536 yards.
Yeah. And I hope you're right. So there's two ways to look at what they said yesterday, because there were multiple guys that used the word measured for how they're going to be their offseason. They might have been playing a little possum, right? Like, we're not going to tell everybody we're going to be aggressive.
Of course.
Hopefully. Last year, though, in the same press conference, George Payton told us, hey, we're not going to be like we were in year one where we were the highest spending team in free agency. Mm-hmm. You can't do that every year. Mm-hmm. He referenced year one again yesterday, said you can't do it every year. So we have evidence to suggest he shoots straight with us in this meeting, mm-hmm. or in this press conference. He's not playing possum. I don't need him to be the highest spending team.
Nope.
Typically speaking, the highest spending team, you're buying a bunch of players that, for whatever reason, are on the open market.
The team
right?
that knows them the best decided they no longer want them.
Now, some of the reasons can be good, of like, hey,
cap casualty, or
he's expensive, and we got two or three guys behind him that are younger, that we're just going to go cheaper.
Abundance of riches.
Right.
Yeah.
Sometimes they could be a problem. Sometimes they could be injury prone. Like, okay, you got to figure out which guys. But my hope is, if they find one or two guys that's like that guy, if we spend the money, could help our team by leaps and bounds. T. Higgins is an example. Mm-hmm. Then you break out the checkbook and go do it. That's my hope.
Is that your number one priority for the Broncos in the offseason, is to add a wide receiver opposite Courtland Sutton, or maybe in place of Courtland Sutton?
I think you can get a running back in the draft. I do.
Mm-hmm. I'm talking about free agency draft. What is your number one priority? And this is a conversation we're going to have a lot.
Running back. They don't have one.
I agree with you. And I did a little bit of digging.
Tight end. That group's pretty bad.
I did a little bit of digging myself on that, because the run game was the central harping point for the Denver Broncos the entire season, and it put a ton of pressure and weight on a rookie like Bo Nix to be able to carry that without, one of a rookie quarterback's best friends, a great defense and a solid run game. He had one for a good stretch of the season in terms of a solid defense, and they had some slip ups toward the end of the season and in the postseason. But he never had a solid run game. He was the leading rusher in like 6 games this season, which with not high marks. But there's this stigma, I think, because of his, I've jokingly, like, Sean Payton has like an infatuation or like a fetish with personnel groupings. He just loves, it's almost like he's trying to blitzkrieg NFL defenses with just platoon after platoon of, I'm rushing 3 guys on here and 3 there, and you're not going to be able to keep up with my barrage of substitutions. Which I think he lets get a hold of him too much. But I think that principle, while at its core may be part of Sean Payton's offensive philosophy, I think it was amplified and accelerated by the fact that he knew, just like we knew, they didn't have a back worth the salt in the backfield that year. And so he was just trying to throw anything at the wall and see what sticks. Because if you look at his time in New Orleans, when he drafted Reggie Bush, certainly had no issues giving Reggie Bush carries. When he found Alvin Kamara, the more recent example, he had Mark Ingram and stuff as well. But when he found Alvin Kamara was a guy that had a chance at 300 touches a year. He was averaging in his time with Sean Payton year to year over 200 carries and 100 targets out of the backfield per year. If George Payton, Sean Payton collectively can find a player like Alvin Kamara, I don't think we're complaining about the run game for a long time.
I think you're right. And I think, look, the running game overall was not good. There weren't really even any games where it was good. But we did see in stretches how it can help. So if you go back to the Cincinnati game and the long touchdown, the longest in the air throw all year long in the NFL that Bo Nix had to Marvin Mims. Up until that play of the drive, it was 8-yard run, 7-yard run, 6-yard run, 12-yard run. So now all of a sudden the Bengals are worried about stopping the run because they're giving up chunk yardage.
You take the top
that
off.
Allows Marvin Mims to go right by him. It allows Bo Nix to roll right. There's nobody near him. He plants his feet and makes a great throw. I think you can make the argument that these receivers can make that next leap if they had a great running game, right? There's some extent they got exposed because all the pressure was on them and they weren't ready for prime time. Look, if they had Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and Justin Jefferson, they wouldn't need a running game. They don't have anything close to that. So if you can address the running game, it solves some of the other issues. We also saw, Nate Atkins get in the end zone a couple of times and Troutman get in the end zone a couple of times. You can even make those guys serviceable if you can run the football. The fact that they couldn't for the better part of the season, that's why they had such a discrepancy against good teams and bad teams. Because against bad teams, it didn't really matter that they couldn't run the football. They're B-level receivers, not trying to be disrespectful, but B-level receivers, and a rookie quarterback could still pick them apart. Against good teams, that formula just didn't work. You have to be able to at least run the football and keep defenses honest.
You do. And a lot's been made about the notion of the Joker role, right? That's like Sean Payton's specialty. Yep. He had Taysom Hill. He used Michael Thomas at times in that kind of role. Just like a weapon that you can move all over the field, that you can put out there. And it's very difficult for a defense to try to prepare to defend that player based on all the different looks, because you don't know exactly how he's going to be used because of the versatility of his skill set. There is an argument that a running back like a running back as a positional player could fit that role as like a joker. While I guess it would be great if you found the guy to do it, I actually don't want those two positions to be the same. I want the Broncos to have a running back that is just a damn good back that can catch passes out of the backfield, because I think that's critical in Sean Payton's offense, and be able to give the Broncos a steady push at 4+ yards a clip, and not be fighting for it as painfully as it looked like we were doing this year. If you want to make the Broncos got to go to a tight end, we had hopes that maybe Greg Dulcich could be that Joker role type guy, because he's an athletic guy. You can line him up out wide like Sean Payton did with Jimmy Graham so often, and what have you. Maybe that could be great, but I don't want the running game to become a byproduct of just trying to find a utility knife that you can use, for specialty gimmicky packages.
I hate running back by committee. Always have. I love a workhorse back, and that's because, I grew up watching TD in his prime. And he wasn't out there all the time, and they could bring in Derek LaVille to spell him a little bit. But for the most part, TD was getting 25 carries a game. Yeah. And a team was going to get worn down and eventually give up a big one.
Sean Payton noted that too, about he goes, you could make the argument that we never really got that combination right in terms of, I'm like, you can make the argument. What do you mean? You can make the argument to be made. There's no argument to be made.
It's a fact.
I love the cute phrasing there, but then he said, it's not just going to be one back. And I think there's a misconception there that we should get out on the table about, like, having a bell cow running back doesn't mean that it's just one running back out there for 4 downs until he trips and falls over and can't get up again. But what it does mean is that you have a 3-down back that has the capability to not have to be substituted out for various things. And he goes, he gave an R league. That was one of the first times we got an R league. In our league, it's difficult for that to happen. And I would argue, no, it's not actually, Sean, because now, does it take a special caliber player? Yes. But it's not difficult for teams when they find a player of that caliber to shift to that. Looks a la Derrick Henry in Tennessee and in Baltimore, a la Saquon Barkley with New York, and now continued with Philly, a la Dalvin Cook when he was with the Vikings, a la Christian McCaffrey. You know what I mean? Like, it takes a special caliber player. But even beyond that, Bijan Robinson in Atlanta gets 25+ touches a game between carries and receptions automatically.
Joe Mixon in Houston. The list goes on and on.
But Breece Hall with the Jets, even on a terrible team. Now, all of those being said, they all had, Dalvin Cook had Alexander Madison, who I don't think is the greatest running back, to fall off the apple cart, but coming in spell of Dalvin Cook, he was effective to the degree where he, made some stops out of the teams. Bijan Robinson has Tyler Algier, and I'm not high on a free agent running back class, or I think the draft might be better to do that. But if you were telling me that the Broncos could bring in a guy like Tyler Algier, who's waiting behind Bijan Robinson, who's just a black hole, of absorbing touches for the football, but even Atlanta, who has the bevy of weapons of Drake London, Kyle Pitts, Darnell Mooney, and Bijan Robinson, they still find ways to force Tyler Algier the ball 7, 8, 10 times a game. And I think that's a testament to how good he is with the football. So, and he's like $1 million that the Falcons own with 1 year left on his deal.
I would buy that. I want a guy that gets it 20 times a game. And
Braylon Allen with the Jets.
But let me play this hypothetical game with you to answer the question of which position group you need to focus on, right? Like, let's use the extreme example. Best player in the league or one of the best players in their league at their position. Broncos were 10-7 this year, had a up and down offense, right? Some games they were great and some games they were inconsistent. Which guy adds more victories to this year's team? Jamar Chase, Brock Bowers, or Saquon Barkley?
Saquon Barkley.
It's not I'm 100% in agreement with you.
It's not even close. Yeah.
So that tells me address that position first. The other guys would have made him better, obviously.
Yeah.
But maybe 1 or 2 games better. I think Saquon Barkley makes him 3 or 4 games.
Oh yeah, if Saquon Barkley, I think if Saquon Barkley was on this team with the level of blocking and success rate that we got from the offensive line, with the quickness with which Bo Nix, after that first month where they went 2-2 and it was kind of bumpy, when he kind of went on that rookie of the year caliber run that vaulted him into the conversation with Jaden Daniels, and then especially on the backstretch when they went through that tough, LA Chargers, Cincinnati Bengals, Indianapolis Colts kind of run. I think the floor for the Broncos would have been 12 wins with Saquon Barkley. Like they could have been challenging for the division this year.
That's why, to me, that should be the position you got to figure out how to address. Now, I also think it's the easiest position to address in the draft. We've seen a lot of rookie running backs come in, you plug them in there, they're good to go. So can you get that guy at whatever they're going to be picking, 20 something?
Yep.
Maybe running back is starting to get more in vogue. Bijan Robinson went 8. You're starting to see guys that go higher, but maybe you can address it there. I think tight end you could probably address there. I don't know if the Penn State kid Warren is going to fall that far, but
yeah,
maybe. I think receiver. That's tougher to me. I mean, Justin Jefferson went at 22, but how often does that happen?
It doesn't. But Justin Jefferson went at 22. In what was at the time, let's not forget, heralded as the greatest wide receiver class in the history of football.
It's Ruggs, Judy, CeeDee Lamb, him.
Yeah. Now CeeDee Lamb, he went too low. CeeDee Lamb did, but Justin Jefferson, when you look back at, and I that's who I wanted the Broncos to draft at that time. I was happy when they got Judy because I'm like, we all got enamored with the route running and the this and the that and all, and it was great. Henry Ruggs, holy cow! Which, by the way. Did you read that he's eligible for parole in like a couple of years?
Really?
Yeah, he's eligible. Now he'd have to be granted a lot of it, but like Henry Ruggs, in theory, could be back in the league if some team wanted to take a chance on him, like inside the next 3-4 years, I think, if I read it right. Regardless, wide receiver, I think that it's a double-edged sword because yes, you got guys like Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb that went early, Jamar Chase being such a highly drafted pick, but look at the production they got out of a guy like Devon Vele on day 3 of the draft. And it's like all year we're clamoring, hey, let's get more of that guy, And so I am of the mind, just like I actually just said it earlier today, identify what you think your greatest need is and address that in the first round. If it's running back, go get Ashton Genty. Go get, whatever.
Right.
Some people might say Scattaboo. I'm a little hesitant about that. I'm skeptical, but
it also is based on
go get that in the first round.
Which guy's going to be there at 20, right? If you say running backs are most important,
and then Genty goes at 11,
right? Then and free agency's already over. Like you got to
take the third best running back or the second best wide receiver.
You got to make a little bit of that gamble of all right. Well, where we're picking at 20, what's our need, and can we fill it there? We also got to look at it like you can look at the free agent class right now. Well, who's going to get franchised? Who's going to get re-signed? The list always changes, but I think if they don't address all 3 positions, I think the offseason was a bit of a failure.
A couple other quick notes that I would just, that I wanted to get your kind of knee-jerk reaction to that I thought were interesting. Kind of felt like there might have been some shots over the bow from the Broncos organization about the athletic training staff.
Big time.
On the way out. And we know Lauren Landau obviously was a mainstay for a long time, Flip and Greek and, all that stuff. But some of those comments were pretty pointed about how they had been so plagued with injuries year to year. In the last 2 years since they've made a lot of those changes with the changing of the regime, suddenly they're among the best and the healthiest. And how big of a difference that made. And it made me kind of raise my eyebrow of like, whoa, a little bit of a.
Well, it doesn't surprise me. I mean, they went from Rich Tootin to Luke Richardson, and he brought in kind of the new wave stuff, and their injury problems got a lot better. And then Richardson, I think, went to Houston. They brought in Lauren Landau. All of a sudden, they got a lot of soft tissue injuries. It was what receiver can't practice today because of a hammy during training camp all the time that was happening. And then this year, that stuff was a lot better. Look, Lauren Landau is great at what he does. He's great at it. Was he a great head of conditioning for an NFL team? Clearly not.
It's fascinating because if you talk to the former players who spent time under his tutelage and in that building, we have several of them here on our staff. At the Fan, they have nothing but amazing things to say about Lauren Landau and the effectiveness and how he helped them with their bodies. But man, when I heard that, I was like, oh.
There's a difference, though, getting guys ready for the combine than getting guys ready for a 17-game NFL season.
That's true.
And look, not everybody's great at everything, even things that are in their field. There's no shame in that. And Lauren Landau found something he was great at, tried to go do something else, and maybe he bit off more than he can chew, and he needs to go back to what he was great at. That's okay. Better for the Broncos, better for Lauren Landau. But yeah, that was definitely a shot over the bow. That was not an unintentional thing that they said.
A couple of other little quirks that I noticed from Greg Penner. One being the comments about the uniforms. He gave you two there. He said one, he was not thrilled with the uniform combination. I think a lot of people didn't like with the blue socks, the orange pants, and the navy jerseys. So I think we can comfortably expect to never see the Broncos in that again for a team that's slowly but surely kind of becoming like the Oregon Ducks of the NFL with how many little different tweaks and combinations that they make. But again, that, in terms of being decisive decision makers, like I said, that was another thing. It was like Greg Penner's even paying attention down to the minute of like how we looked during this game in this uniform combination that we just tried out. For a guy that's got the entire empire and kingdom to comb over and oversee, he's paying attention to little stuff like that, which I liked. He also noted the throwbacks and how the ravenous desire from the fan base to bring back those beautiful, glorious, wonderful uniforms that I wish they would make full time, but I just don't know that they will.
First of all, I said it when they came out, and I'll say it again. I love the new uniforms. They're such an upgrade over what they replaced.
Yep. I agree.
I love the fact that they have all these different combinations.
They look better in person than I think they did during the reveal in concept.
And conversely, like when you're looking at it on paper or you're looking at it on a mannequin, it might look cool, that combo. When you see 11 guys out there on a field in it and you see 40 other guys standing on the sideline, it's like, ooh, that's not so good. So they tried all the combos this year, eliminate the bad ones. But I love the new uniforms. And this is going to be the unpopular take. The throwbacks are amazing. Keep them to twice a year. Sometimes less is more.
How about 4? Can we do 4 times a year? Can we make it quarterly?
There's also something different about it because, Richie, I grew up going to Mile High Stadium for home games and seeing that uniform in person. They didn't look that good. They didn't look like they look now.
But again, this is like when Disney pulls Snow White out of the vault and remasters it. It's like when I grew up watching Snow White on the VHS tape as a kid, it doesn't look like if I were to pop it on Disney Plus right now. It's all remastered and whatever. It's brighter, it's more vibrant.
And
but
the
essence
was always awkward, and then the jerseys didn't fit right. Like all of it is
sleeves.
better.
The sleeves is the big difference because when you go like Mark Schlereth wore those uniforms at times, and the sleeves come all the way down to your elbow and this and that. Now, just because of the style of NFL jerseys, everything's all crimped up and tight to the point where these guys got to be
sharp.
They got to be peeled out of it,
But I think it should be special when they roll them out. They rolled them out this year for the Raiders and the Chiefs.
And the last week of the season was also Fan Appreciation Week, and they gave away.
So it was
the
Alumni Weekend and Fan Appreciation.
Yep,
great. They're special. I also think we haven't seen. Well, what does it look like when they go on the road and the throwbacks and the all whites? Like, I'm not sure we would love that look. So if you made them full time,
I don't know. We just had somebody literally during the show comment about how they need to wear the all whites.
So maybe I'd want to see it, but I love all they're doing with the uniforms right now. I think it's great. Doesn't mean every combination's perfect, but the ability to mix and match and be a little bit like Oregon, I think it's great. I think the uniforms overall all season long, home run.
I agree with James on the throwbacks. First time I've ever agreed with you. Hey, there is a first time for everything. You know what I'm saying? The last little tidbit that I liked was we heard it again. We heard that juicy little 2-letter word from Greg Penner, and that's Lone Tree. We heard it again about the
Yep.
possibility of moving it. Now, let's keep in mind, the Broncos lease on the current location ends in 2030. That's a stone's throw away from where we
could
sit
start
right
building
now.
today, and that'd be tight.
Exactly, going up into 2025. So I think we are much closer than it feels or than people may think to some serious momentum and movement on the stadium front, wherever they decide to move it, if they decide to move it at all. Because these things take years and years to develop. There's so much red tape and jurisdiction and bureaucracy that goes into all of that. But here's one thing I know for sure, and I think that's something that we all just need to keep in mind. People that amass the wealth that NFL owners in general, let alone the richest owner in professional sports in Greg Penner, by a significant margin, to the degree where the gap between first place most wealthy professional sports owner and second place is worth more than the net worth of number two. Just amazing sentences that I never thought would be coming out of our mouths based on how things were with the trust and how it used to be. Those guys that have that kind of wealth, you know what they don't do? Rent.
Correct.
They don't rent. They're done with a lease. They are going to, whether they keep it in a downtown location like that other rail yard over by Colfax or whatever. Will Peterson and Jake Shapiro have done a great job of chronicling those kind of movements and where the potential spots might be. So check it out if you have a chance. Whether it's that other downtown spot, the rail yard that's not being used right now, or they move it out to Lone Tree in another kind of urban setting that's kind of a developmental area like that. Something's going to happen, and it's going to happen quick, I think.
Yeah. Now, the fact that they lease it, it's a little bit of a technicality, right? Because it's owned by Stadium Management Company, and Stadium Management Company was owned by Pat Bowen. So a little bit of it is a circumvent the salary cap thing, right? Then that way, every dollar generated from sponsorship sales and the rest of it down at the stadium doesn't count toward your revenue, which then gets applied to how much has to go to the players. It's a little bit of a workaround.
Rich people have amazing ways to keep their money.
Exactly. And it also was in part because it was owned in part by the Metro Stadium Board or whatever, because taxpayers help pay for it. Taxpayers don't have to help pay for this one. They got all the money in the world, so they can do their own thing. They'll probably still lease it from themselves, but I get what you're saying. I'm not gonna open up the wormhole too, but you just brought it up again about the taxpayers paying for it. I don't want to go down that wormhole again, but if forced to, I will say, if the Walton Penner Group does push forward for taxpayer money to help build a new stadium and how to move it, I think anyone who opposes that is stupid. Just go along with it. It's fine. Your tax dollars go to a lot of things you don't know about or don't care about. How about we go to something that would be cool? That's it. That's all I'm going to say. The silly thing about
pro-billionaire,
and this is me being old and like way too into these technicalities, but the silliest thing about people being mad about the Broncos one, it actually was this Coors Field tax. They just paid off the Coors Field tax early. So the vote for the Broncos stadium was, hey, can we just use the remaining years to pay for the Broncos? So we got two stadiums essentially for the same tax over the same amount of time that we originally approved it. But nonetheless, look, having teams in town is so good for the economy, so good for all the businesses around it. The tax, it was 1 penny on every $10. That was the sales tax. Nobody even noticed it. It would have been silly to oppose it. That was a close vote, though. Partially, I think, because people loved Mile High Stadium and hated to see it go. I don't know that anybody loves Empower Field. I'm excited that I think it's pretty evident now they're going to do a new stadium. It's a matter of where and what. I think they'll hit a home run. They'll nail it. It'll be a great place that they can use 365 days a year, entertainment around it, restaurants around it, all the rest of that. The where, look, I live up north. Do I want it in Lone Tree? No. I think if you're out at the airport, it's a 20-minute drive for everybody. That's a little bit better. But whatever, just build it right, and I'm happy with it. I agree with you, and I think it's also important to note that as someone who lives downtown, I live right behind Coors Field in Lodo. So I'm a short walk away from Coors Field. I'm a quick little zip over to Ball Arena, and if I take the Platte River Trail and what have you, I'm right there at Empower Field. And is that convenient? Is that awesome? Great. But the vast majority of people who are attending Broncos games are already commuting from the burbs. Correct.
That's just how it is. So the difference between moving it, if you live in Castle Rock or Colorado Springs or Westminster or Erie or whatever it is, the difference between moving it, having it in downtown Denver versus having it in an outskirt of DTC and Lone Tree is not as big of a deal. It's a big deal to the people who didn't have to commute at all that now have to commute a little bit versus the people who are already commuting who might just have a little bit less or a little bit more. Well, and if you look at baseball, hockey, and basketball, they're also playing games on weeknights.
most of the NFL games are on a Sunday. Traffic's not near as bad on a Sunday. I'm doing it 8 times a year. It's an extra 30-minute
The Dolphins don't play in downtown Miami. The Jets and Giants don't even play technically in the state of New York.
Correct.
The 49ers don't play in San Francisco. You know what I mean? This is not uncommon.
The Dallas Cowboys don't play in Dallas.
Exactly.
Arlington, Texas.
America's team, right? So it's one of those things where it's not uncommon that we see this happen. And I think that the resistance to change, both in location and the concept of the retractable roof, open, close, no roof, there is, I'll just go out and say it now in my mind, there is 0% chance that the Walton Penner Group puts all the money, the billions of dollars that are going to go into building a new stadium and all of the costs associated with that, and not have it be the most multi-use purpose facility that it can be.
Agreed. So they need to put a roof on it so you can get a Super Bowl, Final Four, all these big events, right?
World Cup.
Then the policy needs to be, hey, we play our games out. We leave the roof open for home games. But if you're playing a preseason game and we always get the storm that rolls in at 6:00 and we all got to sit through an hour rain delay because a lightning strike happened in Lakewood, you close the roof.
Think about the amount of concert venues I've been to at Empower
All
Field with
long.
a lightning delay. It's just like,
honestly, a roof would pay more dividends from June to August with the way our
during the
summer weather
season.
is than during the season. But here's the other part. Our policy is we keep it open for home games. But if you got Peyton Manning and it's 8 degrees for a playoff game,
shut that baby.
You close that sucker and throw the ball all over.
It gives you the only thing better than an inherent baked-in home field advantage is an inherent baked-in home field advantage that you can wield in the event that it becomes a potential disadvantage to you, the home team.
I would love it if it became a controversy that teams coming in here for late season games were all mad because they didn't know if the roof was going to be open or not. That would be awesome. That's playing chess when everybody else is playing checkers, right? They don't bring all their cold weather gear. They're not prepared for it.
The Dolphins.
We leave that sucker open when the Dolphins are coming in, right? If the Packers are coming in, let's shut it, right? Like, you can be strategic. Why not give yourself all those options?
I love it. I'm excited just thinking about it. The one last thing I want to touch on with you as it relates to the Broncos is you've been someone who's been pretty openly critical of Sean Payton for reasons that are just and unjust. But well, that word's important, right? You think is that a strong adjective to describe your feelings?
Yes.
Well, one thing that I think you need to be abundant in your praise to Sean Payton.
Oh, here we go.
Abundant and rich and fulfilling, in terms of that, is that Sean Payton asked for help in that press conference. Did you catch that in his end of season press conference? He asked for help. When he was trying to describe the feelings of last year, he said, and I quote, "Obviously, we're still not there yet. Yet we're a lot closer than we were at this time a year ago. That was misery, sorrow, drudgery." Then he goes, "Give me some other adjectives there. Just, that was brutal." And so I, like we all should be, I want to help out our head coach here in Denver. So, Coach, if you were looking for other adjectives that you might be able to use next time you want to reference last year, feel free to bring up agony, anguish, despair, sadness, sorrow, squalor, suffering, torment, torture, desolation, despondent, and wretchedness. That quote was wild to me. When he was asked to talk about, he was struggling to find the mental thesaurus words that were appropriate to describe how much he hated working with Russell Wilson.
Oh, no doubt. Anybody who had a question about that, we got the answer. And look, to me, I look at it and I think well, you ought to go with wasteful and unnecessary and things like that. But at the end of the day, sometimes you just don't like working with certain people. And it doesn't matter if you're having success or not having success. You would actually have a better time having a little less success with somebody that you just liked.
It's called addition by subtraction.
It's not exclusive to sports or, media or accounting or whatever. It's just the way the world works. The Broncos had a choice to make. They chose Sean Payton over Russell Wilson. Right now, it looks like probably a good decision.
Boy,
6 weeks ago, it didn't.
The way the season ended for the Steelers was just brutal.
Right. So We shall see.
Do you still think, because you've said this before, do you think now, based on how it's ended, do you think Russell Wilson is a starting quarterback in the NFL at the start of the 2025 season?
No.
I don't think so either.
I don't know
it's
that he's
crazy.
in the league.
I actually agree with you, and it's crazy.
Here's the other thing. I think if Sean Payton could have swallowed his pride a little bit and just said, hey, I'm going to tweak my system and my offense to work with this guy's ability, I still think this year, now moving forward, they got a young quarterback, so we'll see. I still think this year with this schedule and this defense, and their weapons were better this year than they were last year. Go look at some of the guys Russ was throwing to in week 14 and 15 last year, the Brandon Johnsons of the world, et cetera. I think they would have been better this year, but they took the long view, and I don't have a problem with that. I think to some extent, though, we're looking at guys that I don't know that, my pinned tweet is Russell Wilson's going to win a Super Bowl before Sean Payton. If I had to amend that right now, neither of them are going to win a Super Bowl. That would be my
Oh, you're really jumping out on a limb there, James. Yeah.
I mean,
neither guy is going to do the hardest thing to do in the NFL.
Well, you don't pay a guy $18 million a year to be 18 and 17 over 2 seasons.
I think the record's going to, I think that the leverage or the record over 500 is going to be more after the 2025 season than 18 and 17. I'll give you.
We'll see. They
we
only got to go 8-9 to be 500.
I'm way over time, but I don't care because it's my show and I can do whatever I want.
That's right.
I want to bring in the subject of Deion Sanders with you because I haven't had a chance to talk to you since a lot of this has gone down. We flirted with it a little bit in our last show, but even as early as this morning, Ed Werder, who's a trusted NFL source and reporter as there is in the business, and a guy who has, I think, Longmont roots originally here in Colorado, shout out, is putting out there that, quote, I'm being told he being Deion Sanders, would almost certainly accept if Jerry Jones offers to make him the next head coach of the Dallas Cowboys, that those around him are encouraging him to pursue it, and that Jones is, quote, enamored with the idea. Enamored. We have so much vocabulary on the show today. Man, I love it.
Big word Thursday.
Love it. It's fascinating to me. I got into this with Jake Shapiro yesterday. And I've talked about it, with Will Peterson and James Palmer and all these other people, and everybody just kind of sees a little bit differently. They're looking at the glass with just a slightly different twist to it. I think it's fascinating, the dynamics that are in play. What do you make of all of the smoke and mirrors and the hoopla as it relates to Deion Sanders and the potential for him to leave Boulder for a better destination? Well,
I think you need to look at Deion's history, and he's never been someone who had roots somewhere for very long. The Falcons, the Niners, the Cowboys, the Redskins at the time, the Ravens, like he bounced all over. Oh, I'm going to go play baseball, work that into it. Since he was playing, he was NFL Network. He did Prime Academy. I'm going to go to Jackson State. Then I'm going to go to CU.
The bed's been slept in, but the suitcase isn't unpacked.
Yeah, exactly. He doesn't, again, put down deep roots. So it doesn't surprise me that he's getting restless already.
You think he's getting restless?
I think the fact that his kids are gone, I think the fact that it's like, okay, can I improve upon 9-4, or do I just, strike while the iron's hot?
Like he did at Jackson State.
If I'm Deion, here's the question I'm asking myself. Can I improve upon 9-4? Maybe not in 2025, but at some point. If they go 11-2 in 2026, he's going to be a hot commodity again. If he looks at it, though, and says, this might be as good as I'm going to do here in Boulder, now's the time to bolt. It's better to leave early than leave late because you won't get the opportunity. I don't want him to leave. I'm a CU guy. I want him to stay. But James,
think about the dynamics that are in play here. This is a guy in Deion Sanders who has basically walked into town a year and a half ago, and in just that short span, he runs that city.
I know.
So you know what you're not going to get in the NFL and in Dallas specifically? Absolute power. You're not going to get it.
I get it.
So they ran Bill Belichick out of town in New England.
I don't think it's a fit. I don't think it would work. I don't.
You know what you're not going to be doing if you're the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys? Trotting the sideline in your Deion coach saying, prime gear with your gold sunglasses. You know what you're going to be wearing? Dallas Cowboys gear. Yeah. And you know who's always going to be the star of the show over you? Jerry Jones. It's never going to change. So I don't understand that nature of it. I don't think his style. I would love for his documentary crew to go into the Dallas Cowboys locker room, sit there in front of Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb and all those guys and say, hey, you better get your act together or a lot of you are going to be out of here because I'm bringing my own luggage and it's Louis. You know what CeeDee Lamb's going to say? Screw you. I make $20 million a year.
Yeah.
Who are you?
I'm with you. I think it works in college. Do I think he could go to another program in college and have success?
Mm-hmm.
I do. I think he's in the perfect setting. I think he's in a place that has the ability to be big time, but they were so down they gave him the keys to the castle and let him do whatever he wants. I think that would continue. I think it's a great place to recruit. It's obviously a beautiful setting. The uniforms are cool. Like, it all just kind of works for Prime. I don't think it would work in Dallas, but I get why he's looking at it. And
but the other thing, okay, so if you look at it across the board, we already have heard from Joel Klatt and others. Coach Prime's got an offer on the table that essentially equates to, for better intents and purposes, what it sounds like is a blank check. It's an offer that is it's making Joel Klatt, who's as tied into college football and that program specifically as anybody, scratch his head as to why he's not already signing it. The Dallas Cowboys, it's all predicated around the curiosity to be able to coach both of his sons, plural. And we're just assuming for the sake of argument that he means actual Sanders boys, not the adopted Travis Hunter, because it's going to be way too hard to try to do that with both guys going in the top 6 and Shiloh probably looking for a job.
I mean, he's not going to coach Shedeur down there.
He can't guarantee. He can't control all the pieces. You don't get to raid the transfer portal in the NFL. You have free agency and you have a salary cap. You don't get to predict. If you take the Dallas Cowboys head coaching job now, you don't know that you're going to be able to coach Shedeur. And yes, could he pull an Eli Manning or a John Elway and all that? The Dallas Cowboys are not in the top 7, right? I don't think so. They're not in the top 6 for sure, because that's where Vegas is at. So you got to move up way high to try to give yourself probably up to number 1 or at minimum number 2 because of the teams that need a QB. And beyond that, you got to get them to agree with you to even make that deal. So none of it makes sense for me.
Well, and Dak Prescott's on the roster, and you just gave him
with a no trade clause.
So, like, none of it would work for what he wants. I do think it's a bit of a leverage play. I think he hasn't signed the deal because what else I would like to know of the new deal? What's the buyout? I guarantee it's more than the $8 million that's in it. As soon as he signs it, any other offer he flirts with becomes more difficult because they got to pay a higher buyout. So he's just waiting. We all worried, why hasn't Jamal signed his contract? It got done. My belief is Deion will be in Boulder next year.
Extend a little. We could have waited a little longer on that.
But I get what's happening. It's not surprising at all. He's a bit of a vagabond. He just is. He always has been as a player and post-playing. That's what he's been.
Deion Sanders is on the sidelines for the Colorado Buffaloes in 2025. Yes or no?
Yes.
I agree. All right. Well, ultimately, I think that's will be how it shakes out. But as is prone to, the Coach Prime experience so far in Boulder, it's just going to be a dramatic whirlwind kind of approach to get there. So, James, thank you so much for hanging out with me. Appreciate you doing a little bit of overtime because I think I definitely kind of lost track of time here. But there's just so much to talk about as it relates to our sports teams here in Colorado. And I love it. So have a great rest of your week, my friend. And to the rest of you out there, stay warm, stay safe, and we'll see you tomorrow.